Hi, everyone. This is Maria again, Maria Schmidt with Mysterious Adventure Tours. Thank you so much for joining us. I know I'm excited about this show just because it's one of our most sought after, most imagined bucket list tour that we have, and that's Ireland. Ireland is mystical. Ireland is beautiful. Ireland is extremely enchanting. And with that history that it is absolutely absorbed with it, brings out the ghosts and all the different mysteries and legends and secrets that Ireland has. So it wasn't hard putting a Irish tour together. The hard part was trying to get everything all in just 9 days. So we're going to break it down today. We're going to bring in some folks that I've met along the way. These are special people. These are people that know Ireland, that want Ireland, that thrive in Ireland. And so it's going to make a spectacular tour when we do get to Ireland in July. So, with that being said, I am going to bring in Anne Massey. And Massey is my lady. My lady. She
Hey.
is, yes, she's with Spooky Tales. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in Mike Ricksecker while I'm at it as well. There we go.
Hello.
Wonderful. Yes. So I'm having some technical problems because I'm not rich enough to have a producer yet, Mike, like you do. So,
Oh, I do it all on my own.
do you really?
Yeah.
So we have to sit down over a cup of coffee and teach me how to be
There we go. We could do that.
work with two hands at the same time.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is a special show. Ireland, as you know, it's the number one sought after country in Europe as far as the to experience the fantasies and the mysteries and the beauty of Ireland. There's nothing like it, is there? No. So I like for both of you to be introduced, and if you don't mind, I'm really bad at doing that. And who knows you better than yourself? So why don't you go ahead and let us know something about Anne Massey?
Hi, I'm Anne Massey. I'm the deputy editor for the Spooky Isles, independent horror and paranormal website that focuses primarily only on the UK and Ireland. I'm also an author, a lecturer, and I'm a paranormal investigator with Irish Paranormal Investigations. And I write lots on dark history, hauntings, and folklore of Ireland under Dark Emerald Tales. And that's my passion, that's my life, and that's what I spend every day doing.
Thank you, Anne, for joining us. Anne is my expert. Whenever I need any kind of console or any kind of recommendations, I go to Anne. Anne knows her haunted in Ireland, and I would say she is the number one resource that anyone should have about Ireland. Soon to be Mike Ricksecker, who's going to experience Ireland with me in July. And with that, I introduce you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Maria, for putting this together. And Anne, a pleasure to meet you. So I'm Mike Ricksecker, primarily a writer. I have 12 books to my credit so far, and more coming, of course. I'm also a filmmaker. Shadow Dimension docuseries is my latest venture, which is running free on Tubi TV right now. So be sure to check that out after this. Stick around for all of this, of course. And then, of course, I have a lot of other projects going on. I've been on a number of the television shows like the Alaska Triangle and some others. So really happy to be here. And I see some questions are already coming in down in the chat. Like Sarah, we'll get to some of those questions here, of course. So
Thank you, Mike, for being on top of it.
yeah.
Uh, so, a couple of things here, and I'm kind of mesmerized right now because I had some tech problems earlier, right before this broadcast. So I'm trying to get it settled down before we go on. But um, what makes Ireland so special? What makes Ireland so mystical, so haunted? And I'm going to bounce that question over to Anne because she's my expert on this.
It is because of the layers and layers and layers of history from the Tuatha De Danann, the demigods, the Firbolg, the Fomorians. Then you're coming right through to St. Patrick, and then you're on to the Viking invasions, the Normans, and in between this, you've still got all that pagan druidic darkness coming through. And we obviously, there is the history in respect of the British, which goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and Cromwell. So there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of gore, there's a lot of castles. We're one of the countries that has the most amount of castles still around. You know, you can just go past a farmer's field and there's a castle, you know, and it is a mix of the history, the storytelling, the folklore, the reality, the experiences, and they're all entwined. And you can't get any better than that with the background of the Emerald Isle.
You said it. You said it. But there's also a lot of what should I call it? Faith building with all the paganism and all the different type of religions and followings that actually added to the energy of Ireland. Would you say that's pretty accurate?
I'd say it is. What you have to realise is that when it comes to the likes of St. Patrick, he didn't drive the pagans in, you know, with the analogy of snakes out of Ireland. He was a salesman. He used the existing pagan beliefs and he wrapped them round in a Christian wrapping and coaxed people over to Christianity. You cannot split with a hair the goddess Bridget and Saint Bridget. They are the same person. That is how clever it was. So instead of there being any start when it comes to religion or culture in Ireland, it's a snowball just gathering more snow as it goes through time. And that just leaves you with an avalanche of experience, excitement, places to explore, history to learn. It's every day there is something new to explore and experience.
Mike, tell me about what
Yeah.
you imagine Ireland to be for you. Why are you so enthusiastic about going to Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely. I do have to say hello to Serenable down there in the chat, who is from Ireland, lives in Ireland, and has been a follower of ours for a long time now. So thank you for joining us today. Yeah, Ireland, you know, it's been a bucket list item of mine for a while. I mean, it's undeniably beautiful, and I cannot wait to take in all of the scenery. But, you know, I remember back as a kid, you know, watching, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but I mean, it probably came out in the 60s or 70s, and I would have seen it as a kid in the late 70s or early 80s, but it had the Banshee legends and tales. And I always thought that was spooky and creepy cool to me and all that. And then you have a lot of those legends as well of the fairies and things like that. So that's what's always fascinated me about Ireland is the mystique. You have this beautiful place. You have all the wonderful castles, and then you have all of these interesting legends. And of course, you have, you know, things like the stone circles there as well, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, which, you know, takes that history back extremely far into antiquity.
Right. And I remember when we first spoke about a tour for you, Mike, you said, I want to see ancient Ireland, which
Yes.
is not a hard thing
No.
put together. I mean, the amount of history, and we're talking ancient BC
Mhm.
level. It's so incredible that, you know, it's hard to say when do we stop? How long do we stay here? And tell me about this, about your ancient sites.
Well, what you have to realise is that places like Newgrange predate Stonehenge. And you have to realise then that there are places like Lochgar here in County Limerick that predate that. So we've been doing this kind of thing a lot longer than most people. And even things like the vampires, obviously, we've got a land of Bram Stoker and Sheridan Le Fanu and stuff. You know, archaeologists have excavated deviant burials pertaining to vampiric style killings, going back to the 8th century, long before it was going across Europe. So we really are the home for all the legends, the folklore, the stories. Everything that goes bump in the night starts here.
That's right. That's right. And you talk about it predates the Stonehenge. I think it predates the Egyptian pyramids. Isn't that true? I mean,
I
it's
believe so. I think
yeah.
there's always a bit of room.
Well, that's debatable
Is
because
it?
the pyramids are older than mainstream will tell you. So
Yes.
yeah.
So that all comes down to whether, like in 100 years when carbon dating is gone and they're onto something else, I go, yeah, there's probably about 5 millennia between them, but
But one thing that Ireland,
story, doesn't it?
But there are a lot of connections between Egypt and Ireland, which are extremely interesting.
right, right. That's so true. And maybe we'll make that association with your Egyptian background, Mike. A nice addition to the tour. But one thing that we have to give Ireland credit for is Halloween. That's where it got started. So a lot of things, like you mentioned, the vampirism, the just the Halloween traditions, etc. All those pillars of history all started in Ireland.
Oh, they did, Samhain, and you're up to the likes of the hill of Tara and Mact, and over in Roscommon, of course, you have the Cave of Cats and all the stuff that came out of there. You've got so much. To narrow it down to just Halloween just seems wrong because
You're right.
it springs out from so much from that. The stories of the gods and goddesses that built up to what they decided to call Samhain after a series of tests for the heroes and the portals to hell and so on. And there is just. It's a proper cornucopia, it's just never ending, pouring out. To me, there's no, Halloween is fabulous, obviously, and that means stuff to people. But to me, there's never a bad month to come to Ireland and experience the magic, because although for certain things it's tied to certain times of the year, it's always there.
It's always Halloween in Ireland.
They don't put a close sign on the door and only come back on the 31st of October. It's always there. I can go up the road here to Knockfearna, and there's supposed to be a portal to the underworld there. And that's 365. That's actually where they had one of the last sightings of leprechaun in 1958. It's documented. We are also... the only place I know of in Ossory, which is down around Kilkenny, where we are documented in the Vatican for having werewolves.
There you go. It's all complete. The werewolves, the vampires, the leprechauns, the fairies, the phantoms, etc. If I can get like 6 hours of you guys sitting here, can we just go ahead and do it and discuss all of Ireland? Maybe we'll need 6 days.
Yeah.
6 might not even be enough.
Exactly. Exactly. But what we will be doing is focusing on 4 destinations that are included in Mike, and they were very hard to choose which ones they are. We use a criteria of lure for our guests, because they are the ones that are the most famous. But we snuck a couple of them that people may not know about. So certainly I'm looking forward to presenting all of these. And I'm so happy that we're able to go to these and explore these, but then on top of that, other during our trip, other sites as well. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring us to, and I have a little problem here with my video, but we're going to get through this. Um, Here we go.
Some Irish magic coming your way.
There we go.
I think so. I think so. I present you Charleville Castle. Did I say that correctly?
You
You
did.
got it.
All right.
Charleville Castle is a magnificent Gothic castle located in the heart of Leitch Forest, County Offaly. The mansion house was constructed on the site in the first half of the 17th century, and this was replaced by the castle we see today in 1812. The castle was abandoned in 1912 and was left empty for more than 50 years before restoration work commenced in 1973. The restoration works are ongoing, and the property is now managed by the Charleville Castle Heritage Trust. Multiple events and festivals have also taken place in the castle, and the venue has provided a backdrop for many films and television shows, including The Night Before Christmas, The Tudors, and perhaps more suitably, Most Haunted. Built on ley lines and surrounded by forests where druids held ancient ceremonies, it is not hard to imagine why the castle is considered to be one of the most actively haunted in Ireland. The ghost of an 8-year-old girl named Harriet is said to haunt the castle. One day in 1861, Lady Harriet Murray was making her way down the stairs when she decided it would be fun to slide down the banister. Tragically, she lost her grip and fell to the stone floor below, breaking her neck when she hit the ground. On a night more than 100 years later, 2 of the trustees were asleep in their bed when they were awoken at 3 a.m. by the sound of a girl's voice singing, followed by a scream. Believing that someone had broken into the castle, one went to investigate while their partner kept watch on the stairs. When they reunited a few moments later, they confirmed that there was nobody else in the castle and concluded that they must have heard poor Harriet's spirit replaying her tragic accident. Despite the nature of her death, Harriet normally seems quite happy. She appears from time to time, dressed in blue and white, playing on the stairs where she fell. Visitors have also reported hearing her singing and laughing, and she has been known to play with paranormal investigators too. According to witnesses, Harriet may not be the only active spirit haunting Charleville Castle. Visitors staying at the castle have reported seeing a green mist coming out of a wall in one of the bedrooms, while another staying in the same room was first locked out of it and then locked in it. There was no key and no.
So I understand there's no sound.
It's really super low.
Okay, I apologize over that. What a magnificent video, and I apologize over that. I'll tell you what, we're going to bring it back. I'll do some tech stuff to it while we discuss the next site. Okay, so we're going to hold our discussions on Charleville Castle until we redo it again,
Okay.
because I want you to hear the stories. They're just amazing. But this one is our second spotlight. Is the Drumberg Stone Circle. Did I say that right, Anne? I need you to help me interpret.
Drumbeg.
Drumbeg Stone Circle. One of the requests from Mike Ricksecker because of his ancient history. So here we go.
Wow.
That one was fantastic. Heard it perfectly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fantastic just because of the views.
Yeah.
And it was a shorter video, and I'm happy for that because a video can never tell some of the theories and some of the stories behind the Drummerberg circle. So
Drumbeg.
help Drumbeg circle. Thank you. And tell us about.
Well, it's different to a lot of stone circles. It's what we call axial. It is indigenous. We find them here in Ireland, primarily in County Cork and County Kerry. And what the axial refers to is it has one stone that lies horizontally while the others are kind of stacked around. So there are two stones called portal stones, which you walk through like you're entering a portal. And directly opposite that on the axis is this horizontal axial stone, or the Druid's altar, which is what it's also known as. It's Bronze Age. And what makes Drumbeg so unique is that, unlike other similar axial stone circles, is this one actually lines up with the winter solstice. So that axial stone, come midwinter, lines up directly with the sun on the horizon at the point of the winter solstice. And that's a kind of, it's a northeast southwest axis, and that does not happen on any of the other axial stone circles in Ireland that I know of anyway. And as a result, it's got that little bit more significance than a lot of these similar circles. And it's one of the places where it's very unusual to get an archaeologist and a folklorist or someone that deals with traditions and rituals and so on to agree. But this is the one time where they actually agree that it had a sacrificial element to it. And this was more enhanced because when they'd done some excavations, they discovered in the centre, under the quartz stone and so forth, an upturned pot containing the cremated remains of a youth, which ties into the whole Druidic sacrificial element and that axial stone being used as an altar of sacrifice. And interestingly enough, there was a psychic brought in there in the 30s, and she believed that it's a place of darker energy. She believes that it's, as she put it, guarded by spirits of darkness, and the animals and young children were actually offered up as sacrifice. And the local farmers and locals to the area will tell you that historically the whole landscape was covered in thorn bushes, but they just would not grow in the circle, bearing in mind it was the same environment. So there is so much mystery around it, and we know there are druids in that area. So it just, I love going to places where there's more questions than answers. I think it sparks us to find out more. But really, it is, to me, maybe outside of Lochgar, I think it's one of the most, it's on my top 5 of these kind of places to go to in Ireland.
Really?
That way.
Really?
Yeah. And even the carvings, like on the axial stone, they're carvings of they believe to be 2 cups and possibly an axe as a sign of sacrifice and blood into the cup and that kind of thing. So it's, and then it's just surrounded by, as you've seen, the most beautiful landscape. And that is so typical of Ireland from an ancient level. The mixture of beauty and ritual and tradition and, if you like, horror brought in with the supernatural. And that's what makes it so unique.
Yes. Absolutely. And from what I understand, it's almost like a composition of the sea, of the sea,
Yeah.
plus where the position of the sun
Mhm.
and then the moon on the other side, which created this whole summer and winter solstice platforms, but also provided the ritual and the almost ceremonial
Yeah.
platform as it does. So it's almost very common. And now surrounding it, also you have compounds, correct?
You do. There's evidence of like a communal pit. They used to think it was based around cooking and stuff, but they now think it was more ritualistic, traditional, probably for the time of year, the likes of Samhain and so forth. There were things like they found like troughs and stones. They would heat stones in the fire pit and use them to boil water. Again, they think that's more tied now to traditional rather than people actually living there. It would have been occupied, I would assume, at some point by hunters as
Oh,
a
did we
method of
lose her?
protection, because they had kind of crude huts and stuff there as well. It's definitely not there by accident. It's as with so many of these locations in Ireland, we have this idea for some reason when we think back to the Bronze Age or before even, we have this idea of what we learned growing up of like Homo erectus and not being too smart, but boy were they smart, and did they know the right
Yes.
places, and they knew a whole lot more about astronomy than we ever could.
Astronomy and mathematics and I mean, basically this was their calendar,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
where how they
they worked around the calendar. They worked around the sun, the moon, the seasons. That
Mhm,
is life in Ireland in a nutshell. And to be honest, it still is, because we still
mhm,
are an agricultural country.
mhm.
So that is exactly what we do. We work around these seasons and the sun rising and setting. And that's all imbibed into the earth, and that energy still remains.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. Mike, are you excited about touching and feeling and being
Well,
amidst these stones?
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we're gonna go ahead and perform a sacrifice there, just see what happens. No,
I
I'm
think it's a
kidding.
great idea.
I think
Kidding.
I have to be somewhere else around that time. I'm not sure.
Are we
Yeah,
I'm
looking for
sorry. What was it? Oh,
volunteers?
volunteers. Yeah, we need volunteers.
somewhere
No,
else.
I
Yeah,
mean, sites like this, absolutely fascinate me. Because like you said, they had a knowledge of astronomy that we don't give them credit for. Ancient cultures had that knowledge of the heavens. You see in a lot of different cultures where they, with the mathematics, they knew the Pythagorean theorem before Pythagoras was even born. You can see it within their structures. And also, and you noted the thorny plant. And it's interesting because a lot of these what we call ancient sites of power have that thorny plant that grows nearby. Some of them it's on it. You said that it doesn't grow within the circle, which is interesting, but it grows around it. And this is something like when we were in Egypt, at only at those really significant ancient sites, ancient sites of power, were we seeing the thorny plant grow up there, which is absolutely fascinating. So there's something to these sites that draws a power, whether it was for some ritualistic purposes, whether it was to alter states of consciousness or healing. There are a lot of different functions for these sites, and I think we're still just scratching the surface as to what exactly they were used for.
definitely.
Well, and that's just one of like 10 ancient sites that we'll be rotating into, Mike. So we're going to put it all together. I think one of them is the oldest distillery in Ireland as well, which I consider that very ancient privilege to be in.
Will we
So
be able to drink some of the original spirits from them?
I think so. If not, we're going to try to at
Yeah,
least
that's how we keep
engage with them.
session here in Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a good time there for sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. So with that being said, give us a little introduction for Charleville. Do you mind, Anne? I think I'm
Well,
ready for that. Mhm.
yeah. Well, when you're looking at the video, it doesn't give, to me, it's not giving it credit for how wow it actually is when you drive up, because you come up through the ancient woodlands and the oak trees and everything else. And then before you, it just opens out this incredible neo-Gothic structure, which is like something out of every spooky haunted film you've ever seen. But there it is right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It's so proximal to Lep Castle. You wonder, and there's a lot of course, all of Ireland, as we once discussed, is full of energy and spiritual activity, etc. But for Charleville to be so close to what we're going to be showing later on, the Lep Castle, it's remarkable. The short
It's
distance.
not a coincidence. It's,
Okay.
again, it was heavily druidic.
Mhm.
The lay of the land, um, the the clans that were there at the time building their settlements, and they became seats of power, both Charleville and Lep, and out to Burcastle even, which is around there, and everything. That whole particular area of County Offaly actually came under an area called Ely, which is where the first Prince of Ely came. That's for later on. But it, again, none of these castles are built in locations by accident or on a whim. They're there for a reason, because of their resources, their natural resources, of course. That's very, very important. But because they will have significance with regards to ritualistic, because the clans always look to the druids for advice. And then, in terms of fortification and being able to create a dominant stronghold on the landscape. And that's why they're there. And that's why they're still there, because of where they are.
Yeah, and that was kind of going to be my question for you, Anne, was because the oak forest around there is supposed to, be the ancient home of the Druids, and how
Mm.
much does that energy, from that Druidic culture play into what's going on there at Charleville? Yeah, you have the hauntings of Harriet and all of that, but is what the Druids had done there kind of helping to power those hauntings and other things that happen there?
I think that's a very good observation, and I firmly believe it. I don't know if you know this, but Charleville is actually built on ley lines.
Okay.
Yes.
And the two towers, one of them is actually like a library, but it was the Freemasons' room. They found the power within it, and there would be also within the architecture, the mouldings and so forth in the castle. There are lots of imagery pertaining to Knights Templar and Freemasonry. And there was actually a secret passageway built into that Freemasons' room, so that they could have their clandestine meetings, and these locals, whoever they were, could get there under the cover of night and enter the castle and exit the castle without anyone knowing they were there. And for all the investigations I've done there, that is the room that, my word, is active. Yeah.
Okay, definitely got to check out that room while we're there.
Well, let's go ahead and give us a little. Hopefully, the sound will be better. Let's take you to
You try it
Charleville
again?
Castle. Let's try it again.
Okay.
Charleville Castle is a magnificent Gothic castle located in the heart of an ancient forest in County Offaly. A mansion house was constructed on the site in the first half of the 17th century, and this was replaced by the castle we see today in 1812. The castle was abandoned in 1912 and was left empty for more than 50 years before restoration work commenced in 1973. The restoration works are ongoing, and the property is now managed by the Charleville Castle Heritage Trust. Multiple events and festivals have also taken place at the castle, and the venue has provided a backdrop for many films and television shows, including The Night Before Christmas, the Tudors, and perhaps more suitably, most haunted. Built on ley lines and surrounded by forests where druids held ancient ceremonies, it is not hard to imagine why the castle is considered to be one of the most actively haunted in Ireland. The ghost of an 8-year-old girl named Harriet is said to haunt the castle. One day in 1861, Lady Harriet Bury was making her way down the stairs when she decided it would be fun to slide down the banister. Tragically, she lost her grip and fell to the stone floor below, breaking her neck as she hit the ground. On a night more than 100 years later, 2 of the trustees were asleep in their bed when they were awoken at 3 a.m. by the sound of a girl's voice singing, followed by a scream. Believing that someone had broken into the castle, one went to investigate while their partner kept watch on the stairs. When they reunited a few moments later, they confirmed that there was nobody else in the castle and concluded that they must have heard poor Harriet's spirit replaying her tragic accident. Despite the nature of her death, Harriet normally seems quite happy. She appears from time to time, dressed in blue and white, playing on the stairs where she fell. Visitors have also reported hearing her singing and laughing, and she has been known to play with paranormal investigators too. According to witnesses, Harriet may not be the only active spirit haunting Charleville Castle. Visitors staying at the castle have reported seeing a green mist coming out of a wall in one of the bedrooms, while another staying in the same room was first locked out of it and then locked in it. There was no key and no way a human could have secured the door. A volunteer working on the restoration recalled hearing noises and seeing light on the floor above him while staying in the octagon room. There was nobody up there, and there was no electricity in that area at the time. Another worker reported hearing a distinct knock on her door at 1:30 a.m. when everyone else in the castle was sound asleep. On another occasion, manic laughter and disembodied voices were heard, emanating from the deserted dungeons where prisoners were tortured in the early 19th century. Ireland is one of the most haunted countries on the planet, and there are many spirits lurking in private homes, pubs, theatres, hospitals, open and abandoned spaces.
That looks amazing.
It does. It does, Mike. And I'm sure we're going to capture better pictures for our own collection.
Oh,
And,
you have no
yeah.
idea. Yeah.
and you're making me absolutely craving to go to Ireland and go to Charleville Castle.
It's nice.
Uh,
And it's so funny because you come down and you're like kind of on the main street in Tullamore, and you come through and you're like, yeah, what's this rubbish? Where's this neo-Gothic stuff going? And then suddenly there's this entrance and you're like, okay. And it is literally like driving through a portal. You know, the hairs start to stand up as you're going through the trees. And then, as I said, it opens out. There's actually an interesting story. For one of the investigations, I was driving up on my own. The rest of the team were already there. And I decided I'd be a bit sneaky, and I went round the back and I thought I'll get some cooler photos. And I went over and I was in the garden taking photos of the roses. Didn't tell anybody, got back in the car, up in front of the castle. We were doing some glass work in the Freemasons room, and Gillian was there and was asking questions and said, who do you know that's been here before? And she pointed to my colleague who'd been there a couple of times before me, and then it was me. But I haven't been here before. So the question was asked, where did you see her? Roses.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And I had told nobody.
Oh my gosh, that's
Right, it's
amazing.
going to be a great night. Yeah.
Nice.
Did you have any other type of activity there?
Yeah, we had. They mentioned there about getting locked into a room. That's happened. We've had the doors slamming in the Freemasons room to the secret entrance. When we said, "Is it all right if the women kind of went down there?" They did not seem to like women being in that room. We've had in the children's bedroom. We've had kind of the pulling of hair and stuff and playfulness and stuff going off in the kitchens. We've got really, not just as kind of EVPs, but with our own ears, really loud
Just
growling.
Wow.
Something more primordial, if you like, than which to me would be more connected to the land, and being that it was down low seemed more likely. Because you got to remember, you know, before Charleville Castle, which incidentally, for anyone who doesn't know, the Gothic design there, the architect is actually Francis Johnston, who did the GPO in Dublin. So, you know, it has those kind of connections. But before that, there was a mansion there built by More because he was given the lands by Elizabeth I. And he's obviously built on top of settlements and built on top of druidic areas. So, you know, it's like peeling back an onion. It's these layers and layers and layers of history soaking up. Put the ley lines in there, and you've got one heck of a paranormal firework.
yes, as
Absolutely.
absolutely. So from castles, we go to jails. And there's one little spot that hasn't had a lot of limelight on it, but I understand it's one of the most haunted in Ireland. It is it replicates or it is compared to Alcatraz in San
Better than
Francisco.
Alcatraz.
Yes, Spike Island.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring us there real quick.
Supernatural activity going on, because it'll throw some light or clarity on the many, many stories I've heard from people who lived on the island and served on the island.
So, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about the island, some of the history?
All the different layers of Irish history are here, some of them wonderful. But in the monastic period, we had a monastery here. During the Viking period, they attacked us. During our War of Independence, there was people held here. And there was a huge fortress built at the height of the French Revolution. This fortress was converted for use as a prison.
So what kind of people would be held here?
The usual variety of rapists, murderers, and so on.
That sounds pretty violent.
So here we are at the back of A block. One of the legends that we hear, there was a recruit class training here. Two of them woke up one night and very distinctly seen a figure dressed in old military clothing standing by the fireplace in here. A little bit later in the night, one of them said he saw this old dressed soldier reaching his hand out towards somebody that was sleeping in the bunk. So here we are in the middle of the old cell block, and more specifically in John Mitchell's cell. John Mitchell was probably the most famous detainee here. He was an Irish patriot who was incarcerated here in 1848.
So can you explain what John Mitchell was doing to be put in here?
Yes, himself and his colleagues in a group called the Young Irelanders had been campaigning for independence for Ireland. He wrote in his newspaper that the only way Ireland would ever achieve independence was by way of armed insurrection. And for that, he was sentenced to 14 years.
We were coming around the back of Mitchell's cell, and the guy I was with said, "What's that?" It looked like something was moving, but it was off the ground. It was a white mist, and then it was gone.
Now, fellas, this is Mitchell Hall here. At the time the military were here, it was a social function hall. One individual, or a pair of them, who were sent to work here at one stage to refurbish the floor that we're standing on, they constantly heard footsteps or doors opening and closing and that sort of movement. Now, this is an area where some people say they heard the banshee. Not too far from here.
The banshee is its spirit. Banshee makes herself known by keening or crying, and usually after hearing the crying, there will be a death.
Have you been there, Anne?
I have a few times been there, and we were actually the first Irish team to get exclusive access there for an investigation.
Nice.
It is still one of my favourite places on the planet to go. It's got everything. It's we talk about the layers of history. You've got the fact that it was a monastic settlement. You have the Viking invasions. You have it was Cromwellian prison. It was used then as a barracks, military barracks for the British. It was then a prison during the famine. It was then continually used as a prison. You then couple that with the fact that you had people actually living their lives there, their houses, people that worked there, the doctors. You have, there are people buried on that island with headstones, but then you have a lot that aren't buried with headstones because
Isn't there a mass grave there too?
Yeah. It's for me, the reason it surpasses Alcatraz is, to me, it is the ultimate hell on earth, because if you were sent, some people did get released and a couple of people managed to escape, but generally speaking, if you ended up on Spike, it's because you knew you were either going to die during your time there from disease or treatment or from another inmate, or you were getting put on a boat and sent across to the other side of the world, be it Australia, be it Jamaica, Barbados, wherever, and you knew you were never going to set foot on Irish soil again, and you would never see your loved ones again. It was the ultimate pit of despair.
And it kept going even into the 20th century.
Yes, it's even into the 80s and the early 90s. It's
and riots and
there
devastation.
were riots, and we also, one of the last people of notable worth imprisoned on it is actually a chap we call the General here in Ireland, Martin Cahill, who was a big gangster. He'd be, I suppose, if you know about it, it'd be like the equivalent of the Craze or something like that. And he was actually sent there on almost a trumped up charge for a bit of imprisonment because the Gardaí were having difficulty holding anything against him. So he was incarcerated there, and it was not long after, a couple of years after he was out, that he was actually assassinated. But we actually had an experience in his cell where my partner Dominic, who's a big fella, he said, we're not intimidated or afraid of you. If there's anything you can do to let us know you're here. And I was on the outside in the corridor, he was inside, and just completely on cue, the door just slammed shut, and we struggled to get it open directly in response to that provocation. But aside of that, for me, the isolation block is where awful things happened. First of all, the worst of humanity would end up in there, but they'd be forced to wear hoods, Hessian cloth, almost like sacks. Sometimes they'd be stripped naked. They were beaten, they were whipped, they were tortured, and you'd have everybody from murderers to rapists. But You'd also have, if someone hacked off a guard, it could be someone that had stolen a loaf of bread to feed their family, and they would also be in there and not hardened up to the criminal life, and would end up being bullied, beaten, not just by the guards, but by the inmates, and so many died. The other thing with Spike is that it was a hard labour camp. The man that ran it in virtual silence. Nobody was allowed to talk. They would literally be worked to death and almost buried where they fell in that quarry. So, you know, when I say it's hell on earth, I'm not exaggerating. These people really saw the worst of everything. And in fact, in that isolation cell, myself and two of the girls I was with at the time, we were in the end cell, and instantly we just kind of felt like this darkness coming over us, and we were feeling like we couldn't breathe, and there was pressure on our chest and here and everything else. And it actually got to the point where we just had to kind of push over one another to get out of there.
Wow.
And once we were outside, we were fine. And it was only when I'd done some more research that I discovered that actually a young lad in his 20s accused of rape had actually hung himself in that very cell.
My Lord. Oh, my Lord.
And to find that out afterwards is more chilling.
Exactly. And
you know, forewarned is forearmed, as they say, but I wasn't in this particular case.
We're going to be sleeping there. That's
I know, it's going to be crazy.
It's an
and
overnight.
Then there was as you come onto the island, there's a whole kind of place with offices and stuff now. It is, and I was on there. I'd actually, being me, I'd gone on my own with a couple of the guides from Spike one night, and I actually done the isolation block on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
but you're a better woman than me.
Yeah, I wasn't scared because I had, and I swear to God, someone walking in tandem with me. I could hear the footsteps on the floor, and I had whistling in my ear, and it was like I had a guard walking with me, protecting me.
Protecting you.
Oh, interesting.
It was really insane.
Absolutely.
And I actually got it on a recording, the whistling.
So you have some of the spirits of the guards there along with some of the spirits of the prisoners.
Yeah.
They're all there. And then there is and I'm not going to mention it now, and I prefer to keep it for our tour, but there is an angelic soul that's there.
There is.
And it's a little girl that they're thinking about canonizing as well. And we'll talk about that during our trip there. But it's got such good and evil put in here.
So just to let people know why she was on the island, it was actually during the time it was a barracks. Her father was actually stationed there, so they were living in a house on the island. She wasn't there as a prisoner.
An incredible story.
Well, no, they did have children. Children were imprisoned.
Yes.
On that.
Yeah. But this is it's a beautiful story. We'll save it for the tour. There is a question about the banshee. Have you ever heard the banshee? And hopefully not, because they say that's a bad omen. But
here in town we have. My mum's family is O'Connor, and it's primarily tied to the O's and the Macs, and we've heard it a lot. Because my own town is quite small, and then the rest of it's all rural, and that's where my mum's from, and it's not an unusual thing. But as is said, because there is a banshee on Spike as well, and there's a chap I was on there one of the times with he says, if you hear the banshee, you're fine. It's if you see her, you've got a problem.
Okay, so you can hear her. As long as we don't see her, we're good, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
I just want to make sure that was covered. We're getting limited with time, and I really want to bring in one of the premieres of our tour, and that would be the most haunted castle in Ireland, if not one of the most haunted in the world, and that is Leap Castle. So let's go ahead and see if I can bring this one in. This is going to be giving me a little problem, but I think we've managed it. Let's do it.
Well, there are many spirits in the house, yeah. They've never interfered or made life difficult in any way other than they let us know that they're here. We see a lot of them. Sometimes to be as clearly as I'd see you, sometimes, or a lot of the time, it'll be like a haze or an aura around them, or maybe just around part of them. Down here then, or mostly down here anyway, we meet with a lady and she touches people. We call her the governess. And she's usually around as well when there are two little girls that play around here that we meet a lot. And she's always with them. And we have a feeling she had something to do with them. But we have no record of any of that, you know. Because it was burned down in 1922, so any records that would have been lost in the fire. And a lot of our visitors experience that. It's like somebody brushing off you. There was a lady there, sometime at the end of last year, she was a Swedish lady, and she described it happened over there on that side. She described it, she thought it was a dog or something that passed and rubbed off her. That was her first reaction or thought or whatever, you know. But I suppose for almost everybody that would experience that, it would be a first time experience for them. But they amaze themselves as to how calmly they react to it, you know. They don't feel threatened by it, as we don't, you know. So it's all good. We hear them. We tend to hear them, I suppose, at night time a fair bit. Now it's not a nighttime thing only, it's just so quiet when we lock up, and it's like it's footsteps, people walking around, doors opening and closing. But we hear a good bit of, it'd be like a lot of people in another room talking. Now you can't make out what's being said or anything like that, but the thing about that, we say you heard it coming from down that corridor and you're sure it was down there. When you go down there, it's not. It'll be someplace else. You know, you'll never actually be at it.
I think I was absolutely blessed to find this film of Sean Ryan, the owner of Leb Castle, describing the haunts. The man is incredible. I've spoken to him on the phone several times. I know you've met him, Anne. He's a traditionalist musician, but he is the heart and soul of Leb Castle. And I think the spirits there thrive because of him and his family. Tell us about Leb.
Absolutely.
Tell us about Leb.
He's not wrong. The thing he says about the mumbling conversations, we've actually caught that on our equipment, like the super ears and stuff. You know, we've been in the bloody chapel and there is the chieftain room. It's like a full-on conversation, but you just can't make out what it is. His little lovely little dog they have called Puka, which is Irish for ghost. Seems to just be used to what goes on around. It is one of those castles that has a very dark and bloody history. It was a clan base. It was actually...
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Sorry, that's Siri butting in for no reason.
These are talking about the tales and things happen.
Yeah, I scared Siri. That's got to be a first. The O'Bannon clan built the first kind of castle there, and it came on. Nobody knows the exact date around Lep Castle, but they know kind of start the 1500s, maybe just before. But it's the O'Carroll clan that was the dominant clan in that area that have the violent and bloody heart of the castle and the history and the hauntings behind it. They were as cunning and sly as they were dominant and brutal. They trusted nobody. They were actually hiring mercenaries, paying They were brothers killing brothers. There were cousins killing cousins, all in the name of power. And when you put that on top of Druidic land, it's going. Now the question could be, is it whatever happened on that Druid land has imbibed the earth and brought forth dark energies that kind of consumed the O'Carroll clan? That's a possibility. But, you know, some of the tales out of there, the Bloody Chapel, for example, the two of the O'Carroll brothers, one was a priest, and they were fighting among themselves on how best to move forward. And the priest actually began mass, which was a complete insult to the other brother to begin without him arriving. And so he just came in and slashed him down over the altar. And you know, it's that priest is said to haunt the Bloody Chapel. And I've had one of my most obscure experiences in that very room. It's also where the oubliette is. Oubliette is French for forgotten, basically. And when it was created, it would have been for hiding stuff, hiding people during sieges and so forth. But the O'Carrolls took it to a whole new level. And we'll just throw the prisoners down there and just let them die.
And that's what they call the murder hole. Is that correct?
The murder hole's up for debate because it could be the oubliettes. But there are other places, and it doesn't tie in with other murder holes that I've seen in other castles around Ireland. They're usually near guard quarters and battlements and stuff. So that's part of the mystery. Nobody quite knows where the murder hole is, and is it the oubliette? But when excavations took place, when the Darbys took over the property, Mildred Darby was fascinated with hauntings and the occult, and she was also opening up a lot of places that had been closed off. She had them empty out the oubliette, and there were 3 barrow loads of bones, human bones, taken out of it.
3 barrels. Wow.
Yeah. So there's also a tale of a red woman who ties in with the O'Carrolls. It's said that she was raped. She gave birth to a child. They slay the child with a knife because they didn't want another mouth to feed, and it wasn't of the lineage to move forward with the O'Carrolls. You have to remember that there's a lot of male dominance, you know, properties, clans, leadership, man to man to man. The women didn't get a look in. And it's said that this lady actually took that knife, killed herself, and is still seen roaming around looking for vengeance. There's a monk there at the priest's house, which is a shell now, more or less, but he's seen. There's lights in the Bloody Chapel that are seen. And of course, the one that everyone knows about and comes up whenever it's televised is the Elemental.
Right.
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
There you go.
Siri doesn't even know what the elemental is.
Quiet, yeah. The elemental is said to smell of rotting flesh and decay, and it's not human. It's more spiritual. Whether it is part of a druidic ritual where they left something to protect the lands, but what we seem to know is that only came about when Mildred Darby started doing her renovations. And she actually, the main staircase that you'll be going up into the Bloody Chapel, when she uncovered that, they found a skeleton there as well. And that seemed to spark off a lot of activity. And the elemental, it's one of those spirits, you need to respect it. You're fine as long as you show respect. It's the chieftain's room. We've had loads of activity in there, and it's so strange because you come in the entrance and you have the big fire going, and it all feels very homely almost. And you can imagine people sitting around and eating their chicken legs or whatever they were doing. And then you go up the staircase, and it's like you have again stepped through a portal, and you're experiencing and feeling. It's like the stones are feeding out history to you, and I think that is what's holding the hauntings there. And Sean himself,
Yes.
because he is a musician and because the place is so full of music, to the dawn of time in Ireland, music has played such a vital role with regards to everything from ritual and customs and tradition to keeping away darker elements. It's such an important part that I do think, you know, even with regards to the fairy folk and changelings, music comes into it. So I do think that it's almost like he's keeping them all in tune with the castle itself.
Right.
And I think that's why it continues to work. I mean, I've gone to places in Ireland where it's hit and miss and where, you know, activity can die down, but it's like it's orchestrated.
It's almost like he keeps them nourished.
Yeah, he, you know, he's feeding them. He's feeding those lost souls. Because that's what they are. They're lost souls.
And he accepts them and he welcomes them, and it's part of his. They're part of his family.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be, you know, hopefully we'll be with Sean and at Leb Castle for an investigation there as well. So much to look forward to, Mike.
Absolutely.
You saw 4. Which one of the 4 spikes your paranormal button the highest?
I mean, that's
unfair question to
ask. It is.
You.
It really is, because they're all wonderful locations. I'm really looking forward to all of them. They each have their own, you know, different aspects that are compelling. So, so I'll let you know once we have finished up with the tour, which was my favorite. But I'm looking forward to all of it right now.
That's gonna be a difficult task for me to feature one as a favorite, because, like you said, everyone has its own flavor, its own history, its own dynamics, and overall,
it's like choosing your favorite child. You just can't.
Yeah, no time for Sophie's choice here. We're running out of time. We've gone over time, but I'm so fascinated. I would never cut this off, because everything, Anne, your contribution was incredible, and I thank you so much. And Mike, your reflections on what it's going to mean to us Americans coming into the Irish soil. It's so imperative, you know. It's going to be well, by then I'll be there a few times, but I look forward to my first intervention in Ireland because of what Anne has presented here. The history, the myths, the legends, the fables, you know, it's all there, but they're all concrete. They're all there. You know, it's not an imagination. It's not written in a book. It lives in Ireland. Legends live in Ireland. So with that being said, I hate to tell you, Mike, there's only 4 slots available for your trip.
There's only 4 left.
4 left. And I know folks were asking. In fact, I'm going to try and get that question all
there
the
were
way
some
in the
early
beginning.
questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to bring them back. One of them that is very important is about the COVID situation. And we need to celebrate, because I think the mandates in travel have gotten so much relaxed. And I know that because you're in the travel business, as well as the tourism business. Give us a perspective of the mandates and what does it mean to Americans coming in?
Well, domestically, you are fine. Everything's pretty much, you know, we're still at the moment wearing masks in a few smaller areas like retail and public transport, that sort of thing. But sports venues are full, our music venues are full, our pubs are full. They decided a couple of weeks ago, you see, we had one of the harshest lockdowns and it paid off. Yeah. And we have one of the highest vaccination and booster rates, and it's paid off. And we're reaping the rewards now, thankfully. And hopefully,
so the pubs are
on, and even coming in, if you're right now, and hopefully this will relax nearer the time, but right now, if you're vaccinated, that's good enough. Bring your proof. You don't need to do any pre-testing before you come over. So
Perfect.
And what about for those that are not vaccinated? Because I know we've had
if
people
they're
inquire
not,
about the
you need
tour
to
that
do
are not.
a 2-day. At the moment, it's the PCR 2 days before you come,
Okay.
and you don't need to, keep testing all the time while
Is
you're
it
there.
limited to PCR, or can they do the rapid test?
No, it is at the moment. It's PCR, but like I said, this is right now, and they're looking to try and keep the relaxation going. We're still only just beginning in February,
Right.
so we're hoping
Exactly.
for
By
what's in
July.
place. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we're hoping for it to be gone by March.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It's from your lips to God's ears, because I can't imagine going to Ireland and being 8:05 and saying, well, that's it. You've got to leave, the pub, that's Ireland. Where will we be with our pubs at 2 o'clock in the morning? So that's when the ghosts of these pubs come out,
All my
2 o'clock
musician
in the
friends have got
morning.
their gigs back. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they are, and we actually have a little Valentine's promotion going on, and it has a lot to do with Mike. So Mike's
Me?
done,
Yes,
yes, Mike.
Valentine.
He has such an incredible new book. It's called Alaska Mysterious Triangle. And it's flying off the shelves. And I believe it got onto a show on Destination Channel. Is that correct?
Well, I
Tell me a
was
little bit about that.
before writing the book, I was featured on the Alaska Triangle television show on Travel Channel, and so it's kind of like a follow up. I wrote the book, and then I got a little bit of more time on season 2. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's all related.
So anyone that books a tour through Valentine's Day, not only will you make the love of your life the most favorite person in the world, but by bringing them to Ireland, but we're going to be able to present you a signed copy of Mike's book,
Yep.
as well as a little charm. You will need lots of charms in Ireland to protect you and to help conduct the spirits in Ireland. So we'll take care of you on that. So if you're interested in joining us, let me put the little website up. It's basically Mysterious Adventure Tours, and then you slash it, Our Tours, and you'll find Mike right up there. And he's actually the only one right now in Ireland that has spots available, and only 4. This will sell out, folks, and especially now that we've relaxed, the regulations for COVID, with more good news to follow, I'm sure. But I think we're going to have a sold out trip, and by sold out, we only have 26 spots, Mike. It's not a big
Yeah.
tour. We don't want it to be big. We want us to be able to take advantage of the small group settings of people that are like-minded, like us, that want to explore and are virgins to Ireland. And yes, and because of that, I think the Banji may be a little more forgiving with us. Correct?
We'll see.
Okay. I'd rather not be forgiven, actually. So
Yeah, but it's a good number of people that we're gonna have, and we're gonna have a lot of fun and make lifelong memories.
yes. And if you look at the rate, is I believe it's $2,100. It's all land, but it's a fantastic price. Remember, we have 4 investigations, right? We're staying in castles. We're not staying at the Hilton. We're staying in a jail. And maybe, they'll keep me there for a while after you guys leave. Who knows how bad I behave. But where else can you stay? And one of the places we're staying is actually in Cork, which is an old sanitarium. It fails me the name of the hotel. Incredible hotel.
The Marburg, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Markham.
Yeah,
And
and they've converted it into a hotel. It's not like you're sleeping in a sanitarium cell.
No. Even though that would be fun too. Let's not discredit that a possibility.
Right.
But everywhere
We've come a long way now. We've got proper rooms with doors for our hotels and everything.
do you really? And plumbing and all that. But thank you so much for being a part of this. And you brought us a lot of wisdom, a lot of
and thank you for all your
enthusiasm,
insight.
experience, etc. And Mike, I am privileged and honored to have you take us to Ireland.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
It's going to be tremendous. It's going to be tremendous. So again, Mysterious Adventure Tours. There you go on the bottom. /our tours. And if you want, Geister Maria Schmidt, better known as Maria, will answer any questions on private message or on YouTube. All I know is that I cannot wait to get to Ireland.
Won't be long coming.
And for those that missed it in the beginning, we'll give you one last opportunity to visit with Ireland here.